Good evening, everybody. And I would like to welcome our Honorable Attorney General William Tong, and we are going to start this. So, about the Milan Cultural Association is a volunteer-driven, non-profit association of people from India living in the United States. Milan has various chapters and members across the United States of America. This program hosted by Milan, Connecticut. Milan is a community service organization celebrating the traditional art and culture of India with mainstream America and our Indian diaspora. Milan believes in sharing and caring for the mainstream American issues. A community we live in also support, collaborates, and participate in all the mainstream and Indian diaspora event to foster constructive partnership and interactive relationship with the local community. So in today's program, I would like to request our Milan chairman, Sri Suresh Sharma ji, to introduce our speaker and allow us to proceed for the program. Sharma ji, are you able to hear us?
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you.
Okay, Hari, thank you very much. And I welcome our Honorable Attorney General, William Tong, for being with us this evening. And as you know, all of you are very much aware of it, that there has been an alarming increase in bigotry, harassment, xenophobia, and violent attacks against Asians. Asian American and Pacific Islanders across the country, especially since, the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. This evening, Milan, along with Gopio, feel, very much honored to have our Honorable Connecticut, Attorney General William Tong for a conversation with our community on how to address this anti-Asian, xenophobia, racism, and violence. Introducing our Attorney General, William Tong is the 25th, Attorney General to serve Connecticut since the office was established in 1897. He took office on January 9, 2019, as the first Asian American elected at the statewide level in Connecticut. Before the election as Attorney General, Tong served for 12 years in Connecticut General Assembly, representing, 147th district, which includes North Stamford and Darien. He is a strong, passionate person who works for the welfare of the community and is very much evident during his service as a legislator. Tong helped lead, passage of landmark legislations. Just mark these, the passages, whatever he got passed, including the Connecticut Second Chance, Act, Domestic Violence Restraining Orders Act, Lost and Stolen Firearm Act, Protecting Owners' Rights, and Act, protecting school-going children. So he has always, been for the public. And when we look into that one, what happened lately, and when he saw the national organization step API, API is a Asian American Pacific Islanders, organization, that between the March of 2020 and February 2021, that organization received 3,795 first-hand accounts of anti-Asian hate from 47 states and the District of Columbia. And his reaction to this news when it appeared in Hartford Courant was when it made him to say, mark this, how he felt about this anti-racism. He said the politicians and leaders perpetuating the scapegoating of Asian Americans must be held accountable. See, the politicians must be held accountable. And blood is on their hands today. Ladies and gentlemen, with these words, I request our Attorney General to have a conversation with the community. Thank you very much for these, your feeling for the Asian American Asians, and we respect what you say, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Suresh. And let me say first, thank you for the opportunity to be with my Indian and South Asian brothers and sisters tonight. We are all, if it hasn't been made incredibly clear in the past 2 weeks, we are one family together. And when some of us are attacked, all of us are attacked. And let me say first, I want to thank Milan and Suresh, and then thank Gopio and Mr. Abraham for always welcoming me and including me in your events and as part of your family. And of course, my very good friend, Representative and Dr. Prasad Srinivasan. Doc, we haven't had a chance to work together a lot recently, but I know we'll get the opportunity again. And I want to thank Dr. Srinivasan for coordinating this and inviting me to be here this evening. We did a lot of that work together that Suresh just highlighted. So it's good to be with you. Let me just say a few words about the recent spike in violence against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and then we can open up for questions. Let me say, first of all, that there's a lot to be proud of. I was with the Vice President of the United States on Friday, and I will tell you how incredibly proud I am that the Vice President is a South Asian woman and represents all South Asians and Asian Americans in this country. And I'm very proud of the South Asians and Indian Americans who are rising in the new administration. Vivek Chopra, Vivek Murthy is back again as Surgeon General, Vanita Gupta. There are so many great leaders in the community, and I hope you join me in being proud in all of them, irrespective of their party affiliation. They really, representation matters. Representation matters. And because they are there, because the Vice President is there, people pay attention to our community and our issues. And I'm really proud of them and proud to be part of this community. Let me say that, when I first heard about the shooting death of 6 Asian American women in Atlanta, of course, I was stunned and shocked, but I have to say that I was not surprised. And it recalls for me all of the violence and hatred directed at our community, not just over the past year. There has been a spike in anti-Asian hate and racism and violence, but over years and decades and hundreds of years. And what has been most, for me, what has been one of the most painful things is that when people say to me and they offer their support, Mr. Attorney General, I am so sorry about the spike in hate crimes and bias-related incidents against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. They act like it's something new, like it's a surprise. They can't believe it's happening. And of course, I want to scream and say, this has been happening for a very long time. And I am reminded tonight of the 2 Indian Americans attacked in Olathe, Kansas, right? One of whom was murdered in 2017. Mr. Bilabar Singh in, I think, Mesa, Arizona, shot after 9/11, a Sikh American, because people thought he was Muslim. So many things wrong with that, right? Blaming him because, or blaming Muslim Americans and then thinking he's Muslim and then shooting him dead in Arizona. And then many other incidents, not just in the Indian community and the South Asian community, but of course, there's the history of the Chinese Exclusion Act. There was the beating death of Vincent Chin in Detroit in the 80s. And the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. And, you know, people express shock to me that today at the border, we have people in camps. And I say, you know, we've done this before. And not the same circumstances, not the same people, but we put 125,000 Japanese American citizens in camps on American soil because we blamed them, Japanese Americans, for Pearl Harbor and World War II. We scapegoated them. And all Japanese Americans did, by the way, is many of them volunteered for service in the 144th, which was a unit of the US Army. The 144th was a unit entirely of Japanese Americans who were the most decorated unit in World War II for the US Army. So this is not new to us in our community. And each of us suffers not only those instances of extreme harm and when people are killed, but many of us experience the racism every day. They make fun of our names. They make fun of our accents. They make fun of our customs. People are discriminated against at work and at school. And people are surprised. And I think that in many ways is the most insidious form of discrimination, because Asian Americans are often invisible in this conversation about race and racism and hatred. I think it's fair to say that the discussion about race and the reckoning around race, while important, does tend to focus on the Black and white paradigm, or the Latinx and white paradigm, or Latinx and white and Black paradigm in this country. And sometimes I'm sure all of you wonder, where do we fit in all of that? And it's because we're invisible. And just this past week, a member of the General Assembly, one of Dr. Srinivasan and my former colleagues, who's a Democrat, by the way, said that he did not believe that Asian Americans experience discrimination. It's unbelievable. And again, what's so hurtful is that people don't even see us and the hatred and discrimination that we face. Let me also say that it's those stereotypes that we suffer every single day that are particularly damaging, and they put us at risk. They're very dangerous. Why do I say that, right? Some people, they make fun of your name, call you names, right? We're taught to not let it get to us. Sticks and stones may break our bones, right? Don't let it bother us. But I must tell you that these stereotypes actually are quite dangerous and put us at risk. And why is that? It's because the particular stereotypes about Asian Americans, that we are quiet, that maybe we are meek, that we just do our work and do our schoolwork and run our businesses, and we don't rock the boat. Those stereotypes suggest that we are quiet and weak, and that you can take advantage of us, or you can prey upon us. Let us talk in particular about Asian American women. Let's be honest, Asian American women in this society are targeted. They are objectified through a racist point of view. They are seen as exotic, right? And in many ways over-sexualized in this society. And so it should come as no surprise that the shooter in Atlanta targeted them, right? He did not target 6'5", 275-pound men. He did not. He targeted 6 Asian American women, and that is not an accident. And I think it's because these stereotypes about us, that we are quiet, that we don't rock the boat, that we don't speak up for ourselves. Many Asian Americans, by the way, we ourselves buy into these stereotypes, and they're not true. But because they're out there, people believe them, and they think that we're weak and that they can attack us and take advantage of us, and it emboldens people to prey upon the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. Let me just close by saying this. It drives me crazy when people say that Asian Americans are quiet, that we don't rock the boat, that we don't speak up, that we're afraid. Because I don't know those people. You know, if you ask me, the people that I know, the first Asian Americans I ever met were my parents. And Prasad knows this story. My parents came here with nothing to Hartford, Connecticut. They weren't afraid of anything, right? They just got up every day, worked 7 days a week, 15 hours a day, literally busted their asses every single day so that I would have every opportunity in life. And they confronted every form of hatred and bias and discrimination, and they worked hard to overcome it. If anybody attacked them or their family or their business, they would stand up to them and push back. And the same is true about all of you and your families, right? Many of you have the same story that my family did or my parents did. Came here with very little. I know Dr. Srinivasan came here with not much in his pocket. And you just made it happen for you and your family. You didn't lay down for anybody. You didn't back down from a fight. You pushed as hard as you can. And that is a story of tremendous strength and courage. And so I hope that in this difficult moment, we can tell that story too. That we can show people how strong we are and show them the true courage and the true strength and fortitude of our community. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you very much for having me tonight.
Thank you very much, Attorney General William Tong. It's a pleasure to see you back here again and to have this conversation with you this evening. For the 12 years that Attorney General served as a state legislator, I had the good fortune to be with him for 8 years. And in those 8 years, we've had discussions, we've had debates, we've had agreements, we've had disagreements, but at the end of the day, all that mattered is the people of Connecticut working to make sure what I thought was right, what the Attorney General was thought right, and then met somewhere in the middle so that we move our state and all of us. So for all your years of service as a legislator, and now of course, serving our state as the first Asian American Attorney General, we're deeply indebted to you, Attorney General William Tong.
Thank you.
I have been given the honorable task of leading this discussion regarding the questions that we want to pose to you, and we want to be very respectful of your time this evening. So if you allow us, all of us want to join in a conversation with you. And I'll begin with where you began in your opening remarks to us. You said we are invisible. I mean, that was your choice of word. So how do we become visible?
Well, one of the ways is what you're doing right now. And I think, again, to quote the vice president, representation matters. Before I became a state representative, no Asian American had ever served at the state level, period. I was the first. And because I was the first, we started celebrating the Lunar New Year, the Chinese New Year every year, which Dr. Srinivasan would attend as well. But many of you know, before Dr. Srinivasan was elected, there was no Indian American ever in the General Assembly. And because of Dr. Srinivasan's service, we started having the Milan Cultural Association every year do an event, at least one, if I remember correctly. And at the same time, I started to see Gopio do more across the state. And so representation matters. It's incredibly important to encourage members of our community to lead. And what I mean by that is run for office, yes. Run for the legislature, run for mayor, run for town council, run for the Board of Education. That's one way to become visible, because unless we're in these spaces, unless we're in the General Assembly, unless we're in the committee rooms, unless we're in the caucus room, nobody sees us. And nobody has to reckon with us and acknowledge our presence and what matters to us as a community. But of course, it's not just limited to elected office, right? It's leaders in schools, leaders in hospitals, leaders in universities, leaders in private businesses. Incredibly important that we empower each other to step up. And if you have an affinity group, for example, if you work at a big manufacturer in Connecticut or a big insurance company, join those organizations. Start a South Asian or Indian American employee group. Lead that group. Celebrate Diwali, right? And educate people about that holiday. Engage people in conversation. Most people don't know the complicated politics of the sub-Indian continent, right? And the history and the South Asian community. And unless you speak up, no one's going to know that history. And so those are the two things that I think are incredibly important that we're starting to do. We're not doing fast enough.
Thank you. And I definitely concur that, the more of us in elected positions, in positions where our voices are heard collectively is definitely going to make a difference. And obviously that's got to be the take-home message for all of our community, that we need, as you very appropriately said, representation. So you had, and very appropriately you had said, Attorney General, that lack of knowledge of the Asian American community, who we are, what our backgrounds are. So is that lack of knowledge about us, do you think that contributes to this sentiment that we feel against us today?
Yeah, it's the lack of knowledge and the lack of experience. I was, before I ran for state representative, I had a Korean American friend of mine, very close friend. He said, well, you're going to run in a district where there are not a lot of Chinese people. I said, yes, that's true. He said, well, maybe you should change your name to your wife's name. Her last name is Hotchkiss. And I said to my Korean American friend, why would I do that? And he said, well, maybe it's better if you hide the fact that you're Asian. And I said, Peter, look at me. I'm quite sure they know. And I think in that moment, I began to discover that it really is important for me to talk about who I am and my experience. And I talk about my experience growing up in a Chinese restaurant, working side by side with my parents, working nights and weekends. I talk about how my mother carried 5 children to term on her feet, right? Every single day working until she had to go to the hospital to give birth. I talk about how my mother was later a victim of violent crime, you know, and how she had been victimized in our small business, which is an experience that many of us in the Asian American community share. So when I talk about my experience, talk about education, how important it was to me and how hard my parents worked, you know, the governor, sometimes when I talk about my family, the governor likes to kid me a little bit. And he says, you left out that when you went to Andover, you went to Brown. And I said, Governor, do you know how much shrimp fried rice my parents had to sell to pay that tuition? and you know, I talk about that because when you talk about who you are and your experience, you find that other people, even though they might not be Chinese American, have the same experience, right? The story is a little bit different, but there are common elements: the immigration experience, the small business experience, focus on education, right? All of those things are something that all of us share. And the more you talk about it, the more people understand. And I find that my story resonates not just with, you know, people in the Asian community or the South Asian community, but also in the Latino community and in the African American community and so-called, you know, where it really resonates is with so-called white ethnics, people like Italians and Irish, who are also more recent immigrants. Particularly, there are large Italian and Irish and Jewish communities in Stamford. This story is just a generation removed, if that, and people really understand it. And so I think it's really important to tell our personal histories, because that's what brings other people in and closer. And that's an opportunity to educate people about who we are and where we come from in our history.
Attorney General, we talk about crimes and how, you know, crimes are classified and obviously dealt with in the proper system through the courts. So what is, or how do we define a hate crime, and how is it treated in the judicial system?
So in 2017, and I will not make it too political, but I will tell you, in 2017, right after President Trump was elected, there was a 20% spike in hate crimes across the country. And Dr. Srinivasan, you might remember this. We strengthened our state's hate crimes laws at that time, 2017. And it was because there were attacks in Connecticut on a mosque in Meriden, for example, on Jewish synagogues in Woodbridge and West Hartford. There were swastikas painted in Danbury on the ground and on buildings. And we in the General Assembly strengthened our state's hate crimes laws and broadened them to include houses of worship at that time. And under our state's hate crimes laws, not only is it when somebody physically attacks you, hurts you, kills you, that could be a hate crime, but also when somebody threatens you with imminent physical harm or intimidates you based on hate or bias, based on race, or any number of other factors, your religious affiliation, for example. And so it's not just physical harm, but also the threat of physical harm and intimidation under a state's hate crimes laws. What we didn't do then, which I think was an oversight, is that we made it almost entirely criminal law in nature. And we did not empower the Attorney General at that time to enforce our state's hate crimes laws and to bring civil suit, and to use the tremendous muscle of the Attorney General's office to enforce our state's hate crimes laws. Today, out of the Judiciary Committee, where I used to be the chairman, we passed a bill out of that committee on a bipartisan basis. Democrats and Republicans voted out a bill to empower me, the Attorney General, to enforce our state's hate crimes laws. So that was an incredibly important development today. Our good friend Tom O'Day Prasad, he led the Republican votes in favor of that bill, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much on touching upon that very important and sensitive issue, given where we are today. Since what has happened in Georgia, I've noticed that a lot of organizations have come together. Asian American organizations are coming together in times of marching and coming up with a message, banding together. What should we in Connecticut be doing, as we are obviously so involved in the subject matter, as through GoPure, through Milan? What would your recommendation or suggestion be to all of us?
I think those of you who are active in your organizations, in our community, or political leaders, need to reach out to your sisters and brothers in other communities and other organizations and really begin to form alliances and to the extent that you can safely meet together and organize, not just against hate broadly, but there's a bill to teach Asian American history, for example. I would encourage people to join together to support that bill, to support the civil rights bill, and to get together and frankly just break bread together and make sure that everybody knows that they're there for each other. I think all of know, sometimes we're our own worst enemies. Sometimes people in our own community have trouble getting along, right? I remember at times early on, people didn't quite have the language. They would say, well, they're East Asians and there are South Asians, right? And are we the same? Can we be viewed as being part of a community? And of course, we're not the same, but yes, we are one community, right? And we don't have time to divide ourselves up into different smaller parts. We need each other. And I don't have to tell you, in the Chinese community, for example, there's this group that doesn't get along with that group, and this school that didn't like the group running that school, right? And there's the Chinese and Taiwanese thing, and the Japanese and Koreans, and in the South Asian community, right? Indian, Pakistani, Sikh, Bangladeshi, right? Sri Lankan. You know what? Everybody just has to knock it off and understand that we are brothers and sisters, and that we have such common experience and bonds in this country, and that we need each other. And I think we really need the South Asian community to step out there, and the Indian American community to step out there and say, we're going to help lead this. And if you need to know who those people are in the other communities, I can put you in touch. And you know what? It starts with just go have a lunch. Get your vaccine and go have a lunch, right? And start the conversation. And many of these people. I know that this isn't the first time, but I think we need to take another step. And to the extent that I can be helpful and the schedule works, I will be there personally.
Thank you. Attorney General, you mentioned your parents, and obviously I know your story very well. And your parents' story is perhaps this story for most of us. We came to this country for a better life for ourselves, and more important than ourselves, for our children. But given where we are today, from where we came in the 70s and late 60s, do you still feel in your heart that this is the land of dreams? Do you still feel that this is a nation where the statue is still smiling and not crying?
Yeah, that's a fact. I don't have to feel it. I don't have to believe it. It's true. Why is it true? Because I'm your attorney general. And so many things have conspired to make it not so, right? That this life could have been very different. And by the way, there are many people that look like us, that have our experience, that have not enjoyed the same success that we have. And we must always think of them and not forget about them, right? People that give into this model minority myth that all Asians are good at math, right? And we're all doctors and lawyers. Not true. Just go to Chinatown, New York City, go to Jackson Heights. There are a lot of people suffering, a lot of people who have trouble running their businesses, affording education, getting a good job, getting access to health care. You know, it's really important that we look out for them. But tonight, the Vice President of the United States is an Indian American woman. And she will go to bed as the Vice President of the United States, and she will wake up as the Vice President of the United States. And you don't need any better proof than that. It's hard. It's hard. And it's been hard for a long time. And I think what's happening now is we're finally recognizing how hard it is, and that people should have every opportunity, no matter where they came from, or you know what their name is, or you know whether they're Hindu or Muslim, or you know part of another faith, right, in the Indian community. And so I don't want to forget about the Christians as well amongst us, right? And so it's an incredibly it's still an incredibly beautiful and open country that I think the opportunities are open to all of us. But what we're trying to do by now acknowledging our differences and acknowledging how we're discriminated against and how hate affects us, we're trying to clear that away. You know, we're saying that's there, that's wrong, let's not do that anymore, so that your children, my children, have a much fuller opportunity than we did. And they don't have to overcome the challenges that we've had to overcome to get here.
Thank you. A final question, and then of course your closing comments for us, Attorney General. Today is a landmark day. You know, today the trial just started in Minneapolis, and out of the trial, we hope when it ends in a month, justice will be served. Do you think justice will be served for our community in Georgia and our community across the country?
In the long run, I believe that it will. And I know that sounds like Dr. King, but you know, my mind is on Dr. King when he talked that the long arc of history bends towards justice. I do believe that. I believe that our country, despite its failures and its challenges, particularly in the last 4 years, becomes more just every day. And I think that this conversation didn't happen 30 years ago. Didn't even happen 20 years ago, right? And that in and of itself is a huge achievement. What do I think will happen in Georgia? I don't know. I don't know how that prosecution will go. I don't know what's going to happen in Minneapolis. I also know that this is not the last time, right? Some people have said to me, you know, with the death of George Floyd, for example, this was an inflection point. This was a moment that we finally had an opportunity. And I pushed back. You know, I objected to that. I said, this is one of many moments, right?
Yeah.
This is not the first time, and it won't be the last time. And we've had many opportunities before to act against hate, and we have failed. We've been successful too, but we have failed at times. And so I guess what I would say to everybody is, I don't know what's going to happen in the trial in Minnesota. I don't know what's going to happen in Georgia. It may go the wrong way. And that would be a great injustice. But I think that we have to look beyond that hope for the best in those places and hope that the rule of law prevails. But if we continue to work at it together and again, talk more about who we are, what we believe in as a community, be there for each other, right? Stand strong with each other. The one way where we can really help, for example, is throughout this immigration crisis, there have been times when people of Indian descent, Pakistani descent, Chinese descent here in Connecticut have been nearly deported. And the community has rallied around them. Show up for each other. Just show up and be there. And I think if we do that, then yes, we will achieve justice in the long run.
I did say that is the last question, but this one has come on my phone 3 times already.
Okay.
So I think it's going to be very important for the person who has asked me this question
Sure.
to be asked of you. We talked about crimes which obviously get a lot of public attention. And obviously people talk about it, people are aware of it. And there's a lot of media attention and so on and so forth. But what about the injustice that happened to us day in and day out as we sit, and you did mention this, you did allude to this, when we sit in our backyard and hear racist comments about us, about our children, how do we even react? How do we even respond? You did use the word stereotype. You did use the word we tend to be, not as dominating as we should be. And a lot of people, unfortunately, hear this on an ongoing, continual basis when they're minding their own business, not involved in anybody else, but obviously know that these adjectives and those words are directed to them daily.
So a couple things I would say. Number one, stay safe, okay? Standing up for yourself, being strong for your family and your dignity also means being smart and being safe. So what I would say is, if somebody's being racist to you to your face and they're threatening you, I would focus on your safety and your family's safety first. What I would do is report to your local authorities and insist that they take action, that they write down your complaint, that they investigate. I spoke at a rally on Saturday in Wallingford, and as we were speaking, Asian American group, people drove by in trucks, hurling insults and racial epithets at us and honking their horns and threatening people. And I've referred that to the Wallingford Police Department and the Chief State's Attorney. The problem in our community is that we don't report enough. Now that's true about all communities of color and minority communities and immigrant communities, but we have to trust law enforcement. And I know that's hard for people, particularly who don't have a lot of experience with our law enforcement system here in this country, but you've got to call your local police department. If something happens and you don't feel comfortable, call me. Call the Attorney General's office, attorney.general@ct.gov. Send me an email. That's what I'm here for, right? And even if I don't have the authority to deal with your particular circumstance, I can get somebody to focus on it. Talk to your elected representatives and tell them why this is important, that you want them to take action for you, that you want them to speak on your behalf about the racism that all of you experience in your communities. And in a larger sense, you just need to speak up. You need to speak up. I will close with this thought. There's an Asian American journalist who sometime in the summer, somebody attacked her. I think she was CNN. And she's CNN and she was in the airport. And somebody aggressively attacked her and yelled racial epithets at her. And she what she said afterwards was, I'm an American, born and raised. I'm as American as Korean barbecue. And I thought that really resonated with me. I'm as American as pork fried rice, and you're as American as tikka masala. You know, that's about as American as it gets today. And I think we have to celebrate that and insist on that truth.
Thank you very much, Attorney General. I'm going to turn it over to Thomas Abraham from Gokyo. Thomas, take it away.
Thank you, Honorable Attorney General Tong. It was very insightful and a lot of good information and suggestion. In fact, you brought the issue of or the suggestion of we working together. If you remember about 3-4 years back, Dr. Prasad Srinivasan put us in the Indian community in touch with the Chinese American community, and we worked together on a proactive legislation in Connecticut on an educational issue. And it's only because we worked together, we wrote to our elected officials, and you and Dr. Srinivasan, as well as Senator Tony Hawk, they all took the issue, and then we passed that, the legislation was passed. And I think that is the need of the hour for us to work together as Asian American community.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hari?
Well, thank you very much for having
Thank
me
you.
here tonight. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Harry, sorry.
Thank you so much. And
Yeah, state level. So we are working on that. Hopefully we would need your help as we do these programs together. We may need to reach out to other communities. Hopefully this will be the opportunity by which we can come together. And thank you for your time. And I know we took more than the assigned time. It was nice that you could spend time and give a lot of good suggestions. We look forward to work on them. And thank you, Dr. Srinivasan. You initiated this particular talk, and we hope to have such programs in the future too. And also Hari Sharma, thank you for managing the Zoom. And we thank everyone for joining us. It was a wonderful evening for us to gather together and discuss the issue. This is a major issue for Asian American community, which we need to work together. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night, everybody.
Yeah,
Good
be
night.
safe. Good night. Good night.
And today's session recording will be available on Milan Association YouTube very shortly. So if somebody wants to replay it, that will be available to the public. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Harry.
you. Thank you.